3 hours away from hearing whether the President of the United States will exit a very exclusive world accord that has almost every nation on Earth part of a goal of dramatically reducing emissions across the globe. Now, the question is whether the president will make good on that campaign promise here, or could he change his mind like he has changed his mind on NAFTA, not repudiating it, now more like fixing it, and just a few moments ago indicating that he does not want to reestablish our embassy in Israel in Jerusalem, more like its present location in Tel Aviv. So he is open to being a little flexible on this subject, and the devil is in the details, and whether he'll find a middle ground on all of this, but he is being pressured on all sides. We're going to be devoting a good deal of our next 2 hours to what's at stake here, because there's even a division within his administration, and of course the president is famous for not exactly tipping his hand at these sort of things. In fact, he is known to string people along, make them think one way, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're going the other way, sort of like Barney on this whole citizenship thing. But that's a whole nother story. We've got the Boston Herald columnist Adriana Cohen, former Goldman Sachs senior partner, best-selling author Peter Kiernan, and Democratic strategist David Burstein. All right, so let's sort of pick through what we have here. Adriana, right now, the president could opt just to say, I'm out of this. I promised it during the campaign. It's been damaging the U.S. jobs. I'm not even a big believer in this whole climate change thing. In the campaign, he said it's a Chinese hoax. He stepped back from that, saying that the science is still spotty. But what if he finds a middle ground here that I think it was Rex Tillerson, as Secretary of State, who said, well, you know, maybe by staying in this agreement, you can exert more leverage, pressure on other members. What do you think?
You're right. I mean, that might be the path of least resistance for him, because if he stays in the accord, he should absolutely renegotiate better terms for the United States. Because, as you know, Neil, right now it's a very lopsided deal where the greatest burdens are placed on the United States with respect to reducing emissions aggressively. It's very costly. It'll, saddle our business and energy sector with enormous regulations, which kills jobs, while China and India, two of the world's largest, polluters, including Russia, by and large, get a free pass. And so the way the accord stands right now, it is not a good deal for America. So if President Trump does decide to take that middle path, I strongly encourage him to renegotiate better terms for the United States. All right,
Peter, as far as I understand here, even if the president opts to formally leave this, you have to wait 3 years from the point at which we committed to it, 2016. Then another year that would carry you past the next presidential election by 1 day. So that's if he left today and opted to leave today.
Yeah, I like the analysis that was just mentioned. I think stay and renegotiate is a better. This do I stay or do I go? It resolves itself in a bunch of caveats, I believe. But there are reasons apart from just the environmental to really worry about this. We produce now. We are a major player in the production of oil. We produce a multiple of the gas that Saudi Arabia does. So as a producer, we should care what goes on in that room. And secondly, China has already cemented its lead as a player in alternative energy. They spend hundreds of billions of dollars every couple of years on this.
Yeah, but they're the biggest emissions violator on the planet.
It's a perfect example. They are addicted to coal. They spend so much on coal. They are the #1 trading partner, as you say, with Saudi Arabia. But they have said, the greatest new innovation, a great opportunity for jobs and profits and a lot of things Republicans like, lays at the feet of alternative energy. So we're going to spend $130 billion a year trying to chase it, both in their own country and abroad. They spent $30 billion last year on alternative energy projects abroad.
Interesting.
China's the one to watch here.
David, let's say you have the position, not that I don't think you do. Go ahead, Mr. President, leave. You could argue that the downward trend in emissions that's been spearheaded by cheaper natural gas, cleaner in this country, would continue regardless. And our, emissions levels, which are down already 15% from when this went into effect, from those 2005 levels, you could argue, well, it's doing the trick, or we're well on that way without a worldwide edict.
Well, sure, you could certainly make that argument, but I think
because I just did,
right.
Yeah.
But I think the question here is about, as Peter points out, it's about simply more than just the environment here. And so regardless of what's actually happening with emissions, there are lots of reasons why we want to be at the negotiating table in this room. Opting out of this agreement, as I think people have rightly pointed out, leaves us in a group with Nicaragua and Syria, which is not really a group the United States is used to being in, and I think makes a statement about where we're saying we want to.
But we do have a disproportionate share of the burden, financial and otherwise, with this, and that goes with being the richest country on earth. I understand that, but China not so much. Many years out, and to Peter's point, I mean they can preach and yet not have to deal with the dirty little detail of exercising.
Well, and that's part. Trump has talked a great deal about wanting to put more pressure on China. We haven't seen a tremendous amount of results on that front. Right. This is an opportunity to do that. Opting out of the agreement doesn't really give us any ability to do that.
Okay, Adriana, one of the things I always think of with this, and maybe Peter is right to talk about this leverage issue and try to use being in this, but again, I keep coming back to maybe global market forces themselves, certainly internally with the United States, whether you're talking cleaner, more environmentally friendly fracking procedures, what's going on with natural gas, that belonging to a club agreement like this, whatever you want to call it, there could be very little rationale behind it. I mean, I understand others are all part of it. You're not, you want in, but in for what? What leverage and what are you trying to get when it's happening already? And we're doing it already, even if we opt out. What do you think?
You're absolutely right. And I do think that
really?
if the United States
I literally just made that up. It's so I'm kidding. Go ahead.
But what I want to say is, I know, people are saying, oh, well, do you want to join Nicaragua, let's say, and Syria as the only two countries that are not participating in this? But the reality is, if the United States pulls out, the thing may very well fall apart, and then we'll have many more countries also exiting the agreement. So I'm not so concerned with who we're keeping company with. I do want to say that, Donald Trump, when he campaigned, he made promises to the American people that he was going to be a jobs president. He was going to cut regulation that is, throwing a wet blanket off economic recovery. And by injecting ourselves, by sticking in this accord, it's undoubtedly going to be hurting us economically, which gives a big economic advantage to China. So it's no wonder that China wants the United States to remain in the accord, because it gives them an advantage.
I'm not pro or con here. I'm just saying that the president, I don't think, can make a bad decision on this. I know what certainly the fears that have been raised, and I agree with David in that respect. But Peter, one of the things I see here is that the trend is actually the president's friend here. So play out the possibility he says, no, I'm sorry, France is going to get in Le Huff or whatever, but I'm not going to do this. I don't see any valid reason to do so. I'm more interested in American jobs. I think it was even Gary Cohn, his economic advisor, had said that if the president had to choose between a clean environment and jobs, he'd pick jobs every time. So maybe that's what this is coming down to.
If it boils down to something that simple, I would say, of course, he'll go with jobs. My argument would be, look at how this thing was formulated. It was really done in the final closing weeks of the Obama administration. It was not ratified by the Senate. This isn't something that's broadly approved of by the American people. This was done
it's kind of like the Iran deal.
It was very like the Iran deal. It's done in a small group. And the difficulty is that what I think the president doesn't want to do is get painted into a corner by Obama. And what he could do is go and renegotiate the terms, say, those terms, we're not going to meet them. We can't do coal. We can't do some of the things with natural gas and fracking and meet those terms.
So he could play with the gold numbers. How would you feel about that? Let's say he does that. That has come up increasingly as a middle ground here. I'm going to stay in this club. I'm going to, like he did with NAFTA, I'm going to renegotiate the whole thing. But how would his supporters look at that? How would the rest of the world look at that? I guess they'd be pissed that he's changing what we agreed to, but at least he's not opting out.
Well, I think in terms of selling things to Donald Trump's supporters, I think he's got a pretty good ability to sell whatever he wants to sell to his own supporters. And I think so regardless of whether he stays in or not, I'm sure he's more than capable. One thing he's very good at is being able to make the argument about what's going on. I think the important thing to also look at here when it comes to jobs, though, is look at the number of CEOs across the country who are responsible for huge pieces of American job growth who have said this is an important thing to do. Look at Rex Tillerson, who probably knows more about the state of oil in this country than I would argue the vast majority of people who think it's a good idea to stay in this.
Yesterday, Exxon Cheryl's 2 out of 3 of them saying
So I think
make this a part of your thinking.
I think it's important to look at, it's not as simple as just saying, well, there's regulation here. Is that good?
But you're
or bad
leaving out
for
all
jobs?
the U.S. manufacturers who aren't keen on this and think that it's going to hurt them, right?
Right.
And a lot of unions who represent those jobs.
But also we know that big parts of the future job growth are not necessarily going to come from those industries, despite what Trump is saying and promising, right? So it's important to look at the totality of the American business community who has now come to the consensus that this is an important thing for the future of America.
All right, real quickly then, how do you think the president, your opinions notwithstanding, will weigh in on this?
I think he's ultimately going to decide to pull out of the deal.
Out with a lot of caveats hanging on, but it's going to be out, which will be a sort of a disappointing for everybody. But that's what he's going to do.
Adriana.
I think he's going to pull out, and he's going to honor his promises to the American people.
Since we're all weighing in, I don't think he does. I don't think he pulls out. I think he finds a middle ground here, surprises some folks. But again, I'm going to destroy this tape if I'm wrong.
I hope you're right.
We got to wait for the final rose.
We'll see. We'll see. Guys, thank you all very, very much. And Adriana, much appreciated. Well, European countries and others are